Dear writer, you need to quit. This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. My name is Becca Syme, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach with thousands of hours of coaching 6 and 7 figure authors, mid-listers, major award winners, and new authors alike, because everyone needs to quit something. Anyone can tell you what worked for them, and of course they say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. Well, I can tell you why. Welcome to the Quitcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 18 of the Quitcast. Today, we are talking about the Clifton Strengths theme of focus. And we have some amazing authors on today who are high focus in all different ways, which is always really cool for you to be able to hear many different iterations of focus. And we also have a little snippet of Becca and Terry talking about how does focus look and what is important to know about it, especially if you're a writer. So let's tune in and listen and take it away, Becca and Terry.
Focus. What does focus look like in people as a strength or a talent?
I always think of focus as the blinders. Like once you lock onto the goal, and you put the blinders on, and now you get to decide based on what the goal is, what are the things that belong inside the tunnel, inside the blinders, and what don't. And the focus is really good at being able to prioritize what should happen because of what the goal is, right? And the way that one of my very first coaches explained it is it's language that almost all focused people will use at some point. If you're 1 degree off at the beginning of where you're aiming at, then how you end up is so far off target. And so knowing at each step where you are and what the goal is should keep you locked on to how to get there. And we talk about focus as having a click. So once they set the goal, then all of a sudden the path there is illuminated because it clicks in with what should be happening.
And how does focus look different than like a person who would do a similar thing with strategic or achiever or something like that? How would it manifest differently if someone doesn't have, someone might have those and go, I do the kind of thing that you just said, but how does it manifest or seem different?
So typically futuristics are more long-term vision, right? Like something that they want to see happen. It may or may not be an actual goal. It may just be the possibilities of what might be what's possible in the future, or that future orientation. And a high strategic is typically many paths and looking for the most efficient or effective path. And typically they don't lock on in the same way. Like they're not really able to make the same kinds of decisions about what's important to be done or not based on what the goal is that you're looking for to accomplish. The strategic can tell you, 5 different ways for how you can proceed from where you are. And they might be able to tell you where you'll end up if you do that, but they're not always good prioritizers. Right.
And focus prioritizes.
Focus so good at prioritizing. So a
Okay.
lot of times when you'll hear a focus person talk to you, they'll be like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because it feels to them when people do too many things on too many paths that they have a too split of a focus. And for somebody who's high in that particular strength, they would not function well if there were too many goals or too many splits.
So they go from one to the next and worry about one thing at a time as they get there and then adjust where they are.
Right. Or they have a really big long-term goal.
Right.
Right. Some focused people have that, like, I want to be the best entrepreneur in the world, or I want to make $1 million, or I want to hit a list, or I want to do this. Right. Like they might have a very abstract, doesn't have to even be a concrete goal sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
But when they feel that lock, you can almost physically see it happen with a high focus person where they're like, oh, that's what I want to do. Well, then this is out, that's out, this is in, like, here's the path, and there we go.
When writers are coming to you then and it's a focus, challenge with that talent or theme. Is there something that they are doing often that's causing that focus to get out of whack, or to, like, have they narrowed their focus too much, or
No,
is there anything what's the common issue when focus comes to you in the strength
usually it's
writing?
distraction, right? Like usually it's, but I
Not
heard
able
that
to
I
become focused.
right, like I heard I should be doing this, or I heard I should be doing that, or and this is sort of the downside of having high focus. And we talked about this a touch with some of the authors, right? Where when you have children, it changes your ability to focus on only your own goals anymore.
Right.
And so when you're wired to be a high focus, you now have to take into account, how do my children's goals fit in with mine, or how do my family's goals, how do my goals fit in with my family's goals? If I want to be a really good dad, how do I be a good dad and also a good worker or a good writer or a good, whatever. And so it's so much harder to split focus. So the more narrow you can be, it doesn't, and I want to say this very clearly, it doesn't have to be only one.
Right.
That's not a requirement.
Right.
But the more goals that you have, the more split you get, and the harder it becomes to do all of them really effectively. And the benefit of focus is being able to get where you actually aim, and knowing how to utilize that focus to pull off things that just aren't important because they're distracting you from where you really want to get to.
I find too, when we're coaching, a lot of times the focus is the issue, but it's not manifesting because they think it's a misfiring of another strength. Like they'll think it's their achievers not doing the right thing, or their
Mhm.
their deliberatives too deliberative, or something like that. And then you realize it's the actual focus part of it. So is that something that focus people should be aware of? That it's more of
Mhm.
a flavor, like the activator. It works on every single one, and you can, because I can see what you just said for sure. Like depending on other strengths, you could multitask even more depending on how big your plate is. Focus can work more with, yeah. So that's an
Yeah.
issue, right? For sure.
Yeah, you can have a lot of little segments. Like I know there are several people with high focus who have really big plates because they have multiple things to do, but typically then they're segmenting how they're attacking those things, and they work at their best when they really let themselves put the blinders up and do the work for whatever time they're going to do. So like just as a for instance, we have a very high focus, high futuristic, both of which can tend to have that like long vision kind of space, and also a high analytical. He's high analytical, and so you see this very like you'll hear the future or the focus lock, and then like just put the blinders on and go go go. Whereas like people who have multiple jobs maybe, or who have multiple functions that they have to perform, or multiple businesses with high focus, might just switch between those businesses, but they're never truly multitasking, they're task switching, and they'll do the best when they can knock out the stuff and then move on, and knock out the stuff and then move on. Let's start off with Robin, and tell us who you are, what you write, etc., if you'd like to, and then where your focus is in your top five.
Okay, hi, I'm Robin Covington, and I write romance. I write straight and LGBTQ romance, and I'm a lawyer by day, so I think that adds in a little bit there. And let's see, you want to know where my focus was? So see,
I have
got
you
it
as
there.
number two focus.
So my name is Marc Lewis. I've been writing full time for over 5 years now. I have written about 170 books, mostly novellas under various pen names, mostly romance, romantic comedy, stuff like that. And I'm number two in focus.
I'm Nadia Lee. I write romance. Also, I write mostly contemporary. My focus is number one, but I don't have over 100 books written, so I feel like I'm falling behind.
Neither do I. Neither do
Nadia
I.
has high competition too, so like
Yeah, I have like number 9 competition, so I'm
boom.
like,
Yeah.
wait, I'm falling behind you.
Number
You're
6,
not.
I'm being you.
Yeah.
I know. How dare you?
I love this. I love this competition. This is the most fun. So the core of focus is that lock on to something, like lock on to that goal. and then put the tunnel vision on and head in that direction, because the actual process of setting the goal makes me able to prioritize very quickly and decide what belongs inside the tunnel and what doesn't. And so it's a prioritize and then act strength. High focus people tend to have a really easy time knowing what is and isn't important for them as soon as they have that goal that they're locked onto. And so the what that comes with sometimes is also the need to not be distracted, right? So the need to put the blinders on and to be able to head in one direction. So the more you pull on a high focus with a small f, the harder time they have understanding how to prioritize and then act. And so a lot of what we talk about with focus is, well, what's the goal, right? What's the long-term goal? And it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to have unlike something like competition, it doesn't have to be measurable, because sometimes it's very abstract. Like, I want to be a full-time author, or I want to be a happy writer, or I want to be a good parent. That might be the focus goal that makes you locked in and prioritized. Or it might be, I want to hit an income goal, or I want to have a certain number of books out. So that's absolutely possible. So Len, let's start with Nadia with this question. So since learning about your high focus, where do you see it the most in yourself?
When I plan, although it doesn't always work that way because I have a kid. When I didn't have my child 9 years ago, I would usually say, well, this book is going to be written in X amount of time. And then that's all I do, right? My entire life revolves around that one goal of, I'm going to write this book in like 3 months. Now that I have my son, I still have the same goal, but we have a school event that you have to go to, or you have like something else that you have to do for your kid, or your kid is going to be home, so you have to entertain him and all this other stuff, which doesn't always factor into my plan, which is very unfortunate, but I'm still getting used to it. I know it's been 9 years, but it's really, really hard for me to change that, because I'm like, here's this goal, and I don't understand why I have to do all the other stuff that I have to do to survive. I sometimes even resent eating.
Yeah.
I'm like,
sleeping.
Why do I have to eat and sleep? I know I have to shower because it does get a little disgusting, but I'm like, I don't know why I have to eat or sleep or do anything else that is necessary to survive as a biological being. Because like you said, once I have a goal, that's all I want to do. I have made myself really sick a few times. I know Becca heard about that. So my health and all this other stuff just doesn't matter. It's boom, go at full speed.
Right. The tunnel vision. Right. What's interesting too is that one of the cores of focus is perseverance. So it isn't just like, I'm mad that I have to eat, but almost like, I want so badly to get this done, I'm willing to go through pain in order to see it happen. And that's a really interesting overlap too with high competition, which you also have. Marc, what about you? How do you see this the most in yourself since learning about your focus?
I can see it just in the way I work. I can like lose myself for hours and hours. Sometimes I'll rent a cottage and I'll go up there for a week by myself writing. And it's like, I'll eat breakfast and then it's 9 o'clock and I realize like I haven't eaten anything all day. It's just, I can do that. There's also like in personal life, like when I'm moving with friends and everyone stops to have some beers for like 10 minutes, I'm always the one after 10 minutes, like, okay, let's go, let's get the truck emptied. And I'm always like bringing everybody back to the task at hand and trying to like accomplish the goal. And just with goal setting, I set my goals, like I have them written on the walls. I refer to them like multiple times a day. I have goals for the day, goals for the week, goals for the month, goals for the year. And I'm just constantly like focused on them and going back to them and letting that like lead me.
I love that. And I love that visual element because that typically helps the lock. Like we talk a lot about the focused lock when you get the moment where everything makes sense and you can prioritize. sometimes you need that visual reminder. So I love that you have it up so that you can see it. That's awesome. Robin, what about you? How do you see your focus the most?
Well, I see it. It's interesting how a lot, my day job as an attorney, and then basically nights and weekends, right? I write that the tools that I use that I see my focus show up in both. So, I tend to, I wish I could go to a cabin. I'm so jealous. And, and right. I've got 2 kids. They're both in high school. We're doing college applications, all that kind of stuff. And I've found that, as my life's evolved and having 2 jobs, I have to kind of almost time block focus, right? And zero in on, during this period of time, I'm going to be working on this motion. And then at this period of time, I'm going to be working on this. And then in the evening, I'm going to be working on this, and I'll check it off. And I see it manifesting a lot in the tools I use. I plan a lot. I have multiple planners, as you know, Becca. I have multiple planners. I also I've become addicted to Notion in the past year, where I have, everything blocked out, and then I have subtasks, and there's nothing more I like better than I'm lasered in on, this is what I'm going to get done during this 2-hour period, checking off those boxes. So, and then over time, I've been able to turn my brain to the next task, right? So, because especially during my day job, I don't always get to plan what I'm going to do. Like, I have to do multiple things during the day to get things done for different clients and stuff like that. So I've kind of trained my brain to be able to go, well, I have to turn off that task, and then turn on this one and zero in on that and just do it.
I love that distinction as well, because it's when my focus is dependent on other people, like, because either I have to get a directive from them or they have to pass the work off to me. Like, that can be one of the hardest parts of having high focus, because I can't always control when that happens.
Yep.
So we always pray that you would have people who are very high achiever, who meet their deadlines, so that it doesn't throw off. Because what we see too with focus is when that focus gets thrown off because something unexpected happens, and all of a sudden I can't do what I thought I was going to do, because you stack things in that way. A lot of focuses get that glitch, right? Of, okay, what am I going to do? How do I, move this stuff around? And so I'm so glad you brought that up. Just a quick question, and this is kind of for all 3 of you, because like Marc, you have really high futuristic along with focus, right? So how far down the road would you say you're looking and planning, like actively planning?
My entire life.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yeah. Seriously. From I tell you, from days, weeks, months, years, 5 years, 10 years, 20, till I'm an old man. I have it. I just constantly go through it. Go through it. I have my whole life. I'm one of my biggest fears is getting to an old man and like having regrets. And I know I won't have that because I've planned everything.
Yeah, and you're tracking it too, right? Which is so key. When with that high focus and that high futuristic, you're aware of when you're meeting the goals and when you aren't. And so all of the goals are relative to each other. I love that, because you're one futuristic, 2 focus. So I'm like, you probably know your entire whole life. And I love that you said that. That was perfect. That's so awesome. Nadia, what about you? How far in the future are you typically aware of?
I don't have futuristic. So I don't plan that far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I usually plan this book and the next book.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some idea of how many books I'm going to publish next year. But that question of like how many books am I publishing next year doesn't even come into play until like November or December. Sometimes even like January is when I'm going to be like, oh, well, I think I'm going to publish 4 books this year. And I'm sure Marc is like, what? But that's what I do. I literally sit there and be like, okay, so this year, since it's January 1st.
This week,
right. Or like I would sit down on like Sunday, I would sit down and say, okay, what am I doing next week to accomplish my goal? Because my goals are set by like, they're kind of short term compared to like futuristic people, I'm pretty sure. because my goals don't go beyond like 3 months. If they go beyond 3 months, they feel really hazy to me. You know, I mean, the end result is not very clear in my mind. So I'm like, I don't understand what I'm doing for 3 months. I'm pretty sure that's very detrimental to some
No,
people. We're
I think
like, what are
it's,
you planning?
but it's
What are
so
you
perfect,
planning?
the difference, right, between them. When you don't have high futuristic, you don't need that to be motivated. But like for somebody who is futuristic focused, that would motivate them, right? So Robin, what about you? How far are you generally aware in the future?
I have my system where I look at it quarterly. I mean, I sit down every Sunday night, like after we're done with this, I'm going to go and I will sit down and plan for the week, for the next 2 weeks. I plan career wise by quarter. So I'll figure out almost like in buckets, right? So I'll figure out for this quarter, what are the goals I want to accomplish and what are the tasks that go into that. And I'll have my iterative task lists and things like that. And then I'll go and plan out probably about a year, maybe 18 months in the future, and try to map out by quarter. And then each quarter I'll sit down and readjust it as well. So because I'll move things forward if I accomplish things faster, or if I'm, you know, need a little bit more time, I'll move them into the next one. But I use like printable planner inserts. So, and I switched to printable because I will redo my 18-month plan like every quarter. So I will pull it out and I will scratch through everything and I'll rewrite it again and I color code it and I have stickers and all kinds of stuff.
I love that.
And I will do it again 4 times a year. So,
Nice.
because I don't like having a messy calendar, I want it to look everything has to be organized for me.
I feel that. Yeah, I love how different each of you are too, because it shows like all three of you are extremely successful at what you do. And it's so important for focus people to be able to see like there's a lot of range in how focus can manifest itself, and that focus deliberative is very different from focus futuristic, is very different from focus achiever, from focus competition, right? Especially because that lock on, that focus lock that's the key benefit of having focus. And sometimes it's very future oriented and sometimes it's really not. It's just forward oriented, right? They want to make forward progress, which is super important. So as far as focus in your writing, what's interesting is that most focus people, when they write characters that they really resonate with, right? Not every character that you write, but when you really resonate with someone, you're going to resonate with someone who perseveres and someone who's active and someone who achieves things, right? So had you already noticed that for yourself in your characters, or is that something that you had never thought about before?
I noticed it in
Nice.
my not just my writing, but also my reading choices. Like
Oh
if I
yeah.
feel that characters are very passive and things just happen to them and they just go along and they don't have any, I mean, sometimes, you know, people are in a situation where you can't really do anything about the situation because like, you know, you're in a sort of what can you do if there's a natural disaster or, you know, government passes a law or whatever, right? So, you know, when I'm reading and I read stuff like that, and when the character can't do anything, but I want them to at least feel like frustrated and try to find a way to do something or change something or make a difference, then I can like sort of go along with it. But if the character's like, yeah, that's it, I'm like, no, right? I get so frustrated because I'm like, and I would not read. I would just quit because I'm like, I can't, I don't have time for this, and my time is so limited anyway. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, I need that in my own entertainment as well. And I don't, you know, so it's not just my own writing, it's my entertainment, what I read, what I do, everything, all the stuff. Otherwise I can't resonate with the character, and I, you know, I'm like, I
Right.
don't get this. You know, I was like, this feels really fake to me. Although I'm pretty sure there are people like that, but I'm like, this feels
Yeah.
fake to me and I can't beat it.
Did you notice that, Robin or Mark?
I definitely have, and I find that I have to remind myself to let the characters really mess up. in my books, you know, to really have the, to do the dumb thing or do the, you know, get off track and like, no, you plan to open that restaurant and now you're over here not do, you know, I find that I have to, you know, that they're not always in this, well, they put it on a post-it note and they're going to follow through and make it happen. So, and I have to, because it, you know, and I know that when, and I'm like you as well, it's like when I read, I cringe when characters make bad decisions, and you know, I'm the same way on TV. I'm like, I don't want to watch this. You know, I'd rather watch somebody chase zombies than watch somebody, you know, not show up for a date on time on a romantic comedy. It's just terrible. So, yeah, I definitely find myself doing that, and I've really had to kind of make myself, you know, remind myself that you've got to put, you know, flaws in these people and let them do stuff that doesn't make sense and that, you know, that's not planned out in triplicate on something, because that's who they are as a character. So I have to visibly take myself, you know, like what I would do or what would make me comfortable, right, off the page.
Right. Marc, you write so many characters. I imagine you can't like probably hold all that, but do you find that is true about you with the ones you really resonate with?
Well, I've never noticed it, but so what did you say? Active?
Like they need to be active decision makers. They tend to persevere in the face of odds. So for instance, the example I always use is like Star Wars tends to really annoy high focus people because Luke is basically passive the entire first movie. And it's like he takes no initiative. He has no, it's always somebody else pushing him into something. And that tends to really bother focus people because it's like he doesn't persevere. He's not a real hero. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Well, my characters do tend to be active, but that's also like good craft, right? Is making the characters active.
So.
As it gets a little bit boring, and it shows who the character is. So yeah, they also, yeah. Now I think about it, they tend to be competent too, competent in one area at least. But you know, there's always flaws because especially I like to write a bit with humor, so that helps, you know, grease the humor is having a lot of flaws and putting your foot in your mouth and stuff like that. But,
do you find that you write characters that have goals?
Yeah, well, I make sure I do. Like that's one of the first things I do is because you know they're striving for the goal throughout this story. Otherwise, you know, there's not much of a story. But
it's so funny that you guys probably would all say that, but that is not common sense to all writers, right? Like it's not something that everyone would consider to be a normal part of creating or crafting a story. In fact, an awful lot of writers really struggle with that GMC, right? The goal motivation conflict, because for high focus people, if you tell me what your goal is, I know what your story is going to be. Like I can almost see it lay out. If you have this goal and you have that goal, I know what the conflict will be. I know all that stuff, but not everyone's wired that way, right? Like that's why a lot of people really struggle with goal and motivation in
like
stories.
I'll make sure I know every character in the scene's goal. So not just the main character, everyone, and then that's where you get the conflict from, and that's the scene will write itself if you know that, right?
I love that. If you're a focused person and you know that, it totally writes itself. What's fascinating is that the way you all have that lock-in of like, ooh, if I know what you want, then I know what I can take away from you. And I know what I can, you know what I mean? Like I know how to create that conflict. People who don't have high focus, they don't have that lock-in. They don't always understand how to make that goal work for them. Because like I can say, to probably the three of you, I could say, well, my goal is to take down the empire. And I fall in love with the guy whose job is to keep the empire going. You're like, oh, natural conflict. I see how all that works. And I know how that would fall out in your story. And everybody else is like, uh-huh. And then what? You know what I mean? Like they don't know how to make that work necessarily. So having high focus is really good for that GMC style of writing, which I love. I love that people will hear that and be like, oh my gosh, I always wondered why GMC wouldn't work for me. And now I get it. because, you know, they will have people that it just doesn't work for them.
I have some mentees, and some of them, you know, we're all different people come to the table, and you know, it doesn't click right away. And then I'm also high restorative. I think restorative is my number one. And so I do that problem solving, you know, like I'm immediately, like my brain clicks, and it's day job and writing job. My brain is immediately clicking to like, how we're going to get to the solution and get that fixed. And, you know, I find that I have to really kind of take a step back sometimes, because I'll zoom in immediately, you know, to like, it's got to be boom, 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 obviously, right? You just do, and it gets to the end, and that's how you get it resolved, and that's how the book works, and that kind of thing. And other people get there very different ways. They get there, but they get there a very different route. And so sometimes I have to kind of backpedal myself, because those two things for me, I've noticed, especially, you know, I have a lot of new people, new attorneys who work for me, you know, at work, at the day job too. And I'll be like, well, this is obviously how this is going to get done. And they're like, I just graduated last week. I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. So, you know, and, you know, it helps you know, I kind of have to remember to pull that back a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. Really quickly at the end, I always like to do this one tip to rule them all thing. And so if you were talking just to focus writers and you had one tip for them about how to manage their focus, what do you think it would be?
I would say, don't worry about other things, just focus on the goal. Because if you think about all the other things, I mean, I do too, but if you think about all the other things you have to do that day, you can't do anything. Like, you get nothing done.
Yeah, I like that. Marc, what about you? One tip to rule them all for focus.
Say, leave your phone at home, go in your car, park somewhere in a parking lot with your computer, and you can write for 3 or 4 hours, no problem.
Yes. Yes. Robin, what about you?
I would say a notepad, either pen and paper or on your phone, is your friend. And so when those things try to intrude and to throw you off your focus, or, you know, become aggravating because they're popping up, write them down and then let it go, right? It's almost like that thing that's bugging you before you go to sleep, and you write it down, and then you'll deal with it in the morning. You know, write it down and then get back to where you are. Don't let it derail you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love those tips so much, because they're so key for focused people. Because a lot of focused people who haven't learned how to discipline their focus yet, they have a really hard time locking on the feeling the click happen. And all three of those things that you just mentioned, all of you, are, how do I get it to lock? Like, how do I get it to get the tunnel vision? And that's exactly how. I hope that it was helpful for you to be able to hear about how focus works with writers, especially if you have high focus yourself and you've been wondering how to utilize this the best as a writer. And I will say, some of the most effective things that you can do as a high focus writer is to learn what it looks like to have that goal set, lock in. Right. And so being able to push yourself into a place where you're narrowing focus, where you're limiting the things that you're willing to commit to, and that you're having that feeling of that click, and there are the priorities, and this is how we work, and allowing yourself to do that more consistently and more quickly. And so that's definitely what we want to see from the high focus writer, is the embracing of that and the finding of the place where you can tune the rest of the world out and really have that focus. So I hope this was helpful today. We're going to continue to do more Strengths for Writers episodes as we can fit them in. And so I hope that you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time on the QuickCast. Bye.